96.3 WHUR and HUR Voices, Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. Your questions or comments toll free at 855-288-4876. Now, Insight.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher.
We can be babies, but you take a look at the registration. You have illegals, you have dead people, you have this. It's really a bad situation. It's really bad.
He is arguably the most unpredictable president of modern times, from battles with Mexico and Australia to the travel ban that has crippled airport terminals. President Donald Trump's actions may have you wondering, really wondering, what's next. It may also cause you some anxiety and stress. Well, on this Medical Monday, we're asking, how do you deal with that? And, of course, we have answers as well. Joining me to talk about this are Dr. Nicole Cutts. She's a clinical psychologist with Cutts Consulting, and Dr. Thomas Mellman, psychiatrist and director of the Center for Clinical and Translational Research and Sleep Stress Studies here at Howard University. Lines are open. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling stress, dare I say, executive level anxiety and stress over executive orders, give us a call at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. You can certainly follow me on Twitter at HFisher, WHUR, or Daily Drum, WHUR. Dr. Mellman, Dr. Cutts, thank you both for joining me. I appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
Okay,
My
so
pleasure.
let's jump right into this conversation. It's been a little more than 2 weeks. President Trump has been extremely busy with executive orders and a lot of actions, and sometimes just with words that for some can be a little confusing, to say the least. And I'll start with Dr. Cutts, should Americans who are concerned about the kind of back and forth and up and down of these White House actions, should they expect to feel anxiety and stress?
I think it's normal to feel some level of anxiety and stress. If you're not feeling that, that's great. But I think it's normal when a situation is unpredictable and when, for many of us, we feel the foundation of our country is shifting. It's normal to feel some anxiety and stress. I guess the question is, how do you deal with it? And we're going to be talking about that tonight. Absolutely.
I would imagine, Dr. Mellman, one of the most highly visible examples of anxiety and stress is what we saw at the airports a week or so ago, when the travel ban came up and airports were not only crowded with people who were being held and then sent back overseas, as well as protesters, who were there. Getting to the airport is already difficult enough, even when the weather is perfect. Is that a good example of the kind of shift, for example, that Dr. Cutts was just talking about and what people are experiencing?
Well, what are people responding to? They're responding to feeling threatened. And, of course, that most directly applies to people who immigrated or fled the countries that are listed in the travel ban. But, of course, everyone's wondering, will this generalize further? Will it affect other groups? Will it affect me? And people are also feeling disparaged, not protected, not a loss of advocacy. And so the anxiety that they're experiencing, as Dr. Cutts alluded to, is understandable and appropriate. Anxiety can signal our attention and awareness to things that we need to think about and or address, and in that sense, it's useful. But when it's pervasive, when a person's preoccupied, when they can't think about other things, when it intrudes upon them and affects their sleep and diminishes their ability to respond to what's in front of them, including their family and relationships, as well as work responsibilities, then that's something that they should be concerned about and try to mitigate.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. It's a Medical Monday, and we're talking about how the executive actions coming out of the White House, specifically from President Trump, are in some cases perhaps causing you some personal anxiety, some personal stress. If you are feeling stressed out, if you are feeling a sense of anxiety because of what we are seeing from the president, give us a call. I'd like to hear what it is that you are feeling, what it is that you're experiencing. Again, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. And here's the thing that I find so fascinating. You can't get away from the news of what is happening with President Trump and what's happening happening at the White House. And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form this because I'm a news person, because it is everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's on social media, it is online, it is on television. You hear it at work. Your friends are talking about it, whether they the person in the next cubicle at XYZ company is a supporter of the Trump administration or not a supporter. You're hearing about what's going on Capitol Hill, about the confirmation. How can you get away from this without crawling under a rock?
Well, a lot of people actually, Harold, are trying to do that right now. I've heard a lot of clients and friends talk about, I'm just staying off of social media. I'm keeping the radio off. I think that you have to strike a balance between burying your head in the sand and setting boundaries so that you're not constantly being inundated with information that's going to cause that threat response that Dr. Mellman was talking about. So I would say to moderate the amount of news and information that you take in. Frankly, I don't suggest completely shutting it off unless, you feel like you're on the verge of having a breakdown or something. I think that you need to stay informed, and I do think that avoiding completely is not a healthy response either.
Your thoughts about that, Dr. Mellman?
I agree that denial and avoidance are not ultimately constructive ways of coping. Part of it's, I suppose, the activist in me that isn't comfortable with people just sitting this one out and avoiding television, Facebook, and conversations in the workplace. But the perceptions are there, the feelings are there, the thoughts are there, and I think trying to push them aside ultimately gives them more strength. But one can, as Dr. Cutts indicated, try to find a balance. Exercise, meditation, whatever, a person has found to be helpful in the past, being attentive to family members and relationships, and the task at hand is all important and is an important way of coping with the stress that to maintain concern, but not to be dysfunctionally preoccupied.
And I can see what you mean, with that. But if you're stressed out with what is coming out of the White House, and then after yesterday's football game, you might as well just end the world right there. It's just, I'm so stressed out right now.
Not everybody's from Atlanta.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we could talk about that.
Well, I think you can reframe that. That's a very promising team that I think next year will have a very good chance at their turn.
There you go. There's always a silver lining. 202-319-7810. 202-319-7810. We are talking about stress and anxiety as a result of some of the actions coming out of the White House. What has been your experience? How do you feel about it? How are you dealing with it? Dan, calling from Southeast. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you for taking my call. So you asked the question about what feelings am I feeling from the start of January 20th. Well, as we all know, or we all been, I've been feeling stress, anxiety. In the workplace, there's always an unwritten rule that you shouldn't talk religion, politics, but every time you hear it, you hear the murmurs, you hear the supporters, you hear the anti-folks, which I do not support this man. This man is against humanity, okay? And I keep hearing it from his supporters. That how as soon as November 9th hit, they felt empowered. They felt like they can't be touched. They felt like they can say anything out of their mouth, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I know I'm hearing a lot of people say, like, in order for us to we all need to talk about it. Okay, I get it. We all need to talk about it. But we can talk about it till we turn blue, but no one, all I can say is that I agree to disagree with what these supporters have to say.
Well, let me ask you, Dan, I mean, when you say you're feeling that anxiety and that stress, how is that presenting? How is it manifesting itself? I mean, are you losing sleep or what?
I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I used to be, I could say I'm an open person. I'm willing to accept you openly. But when you show your cards, I take a back seat and I just not necessarily shut down, but I know, like, here's the thing. I can take an open racist rather than a covert racist, a closet racist. But once I figure you out and I know you're a racist, and I'm taking my workplace as an example, then I know how to deal with you or not deal with you.
So how do you do that? I mean, okay, so you're not feeling, physically or emotionally great about it. And so if you feel that someone is, as a result of, the election and the like, not necessarily supportive of you, of your political views and the like, and it continues to manifest itself. So how do you deal with that? How do you find a sense of calm and peace in your own spirit?
Well, I hate to use the word clique, but that would be my support group.
So stay with the folks that you are comfortable with.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. And I know, we should all have these healthy conversations and what have you, which, trust me, I had those conversations last week.
Well, hold on for a minute, because Dr. Cutts, you wanted to share your thoughts about what Dan was saying.
Well, in terms of, having to have these healthy conversations, not necessarily. I think that one of the things we need to do to take care of ourselves is to conserve our energy and to set boundaries. And it sounds to me that what Dan is doing of having his support group is a good idea. And what he might also want to do is put his attention elsewhere when he hears these comments, because we know there are people who support Trump and support what he's doing. Okay, that's just a fact. So what Dan might want to do is just put his attention elsewhere. Okay, I know these people exist. Here's an example of somebody who feels this way. He doesn't necessarily have to get into a conversation with that person.
Okay, Dan, thank you so much. Dr. Mellman, your thoughts about that as well. How does someone, like Dan, get to a place where they can at least begin to calmly and feel and find a place where their emotions are settled when they're constantly being bombarded with these anxiety-promoting changes?
Well, it sounds like Dan has some well-honed strategies for coping with these situations. And indeed, one of the most stressful aspects of what's been going on is how it has, as he stated, unleashed points of view that were there before, but now people, as he put it, feel empowered to say things that they might have had some reservation about before. But I think there's also been a counter side to that one can take some solace in. That right after the inauguration, there was a huge outpouring of demonstration focusing on women, and we're seeing at the airports, we're seeing people coming there to show their solidarity and acceptance. And while there have been a lot of statements that disparage and disrespect the minority groups, there's also support out there. And I don't think I or anyone else can tell Dan what his comfort level should be in terms of discussing or disagreeing. But on the other hand, I totally agree with Dr. Cutts that and as I said before, there are other things to be engaged in and other conversations to be had to balance one's experience.
202 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We are talking about executive-level anxiety and stress because of President Trump's executive-level orders. How does it impact you? Are you feeling stressed out? Are you feeling anxiety? How are you dealing with it? We'd love to hear from you tonight. Give us a call. Let me know what you're experiencing. Hey, are you losing sleep over it? We can talk about that as well. Again, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. If you're calling in, stay with us. Do not hang up. The Daily Drum will continue. On Sirius XM, Channel 141, I'm Harold Fisher. Jeff Brown is next with the original Quiet Storm on 96.3 WHUR. More of your comments and your questions in just a few seconds.
The Howard University Radio Network is WHUR 96.3 FM, WHUR World 96.3 HD2, student-run WHBC HD3, GlassHouseRadio.com, SiriusXM Channel 142, HBCU, and SiriusXM Channel 141, HUR Voices, Washington.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we're talking about stress, anxiety as a result of changes coming out of the White House, specifically the president's executive orders. A lot of things happening literally day by day and sometimes hour by hour. If you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling stress, how are you feeling it? How does it make you feel, and how do you deal with it? We're here to help. We're here to get you through that. My guests are Dr. Nicole Cutts. She's a clinical psychologist with Cutts Consulting, and Dr. Thomas Mellman. He's a psychiatrist and director of the Center for Clinical and Translational Research and Stress Sleep Studies here at Howard University. Lines are open. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. If you're having difficulty getting in, keep calling. We will get to your phone calls. Lynn, calling from Baltimore. Thanks for calling, Lynn. What's on your mind?
Hi, yes.
Hi.
I think for me, the way I sort of fight the stress internally is I realize that there are more people that dislike this man than people that like him. So when I see people galvanizing and organizing, that's a stress reliever in and of itself for me.
Sounds to me like fight or flight. Is that right, Dr. Cutts? That's what she's saying?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and Dr. Mellman alluded to that, too, with the idea of feeling threatened. Human beings are social animals. So I think, in part, Lynn's response to calm her nervous system when she's feeling this threat, she's looking at the other animals in the pack that are on her side, and that makes sense that we are social animals. There is safety in numbers. So focusing on that solidarity and the galvanizing of many different groups, it can also be a good way to cope with the stress, to think about the fact that we're not alone.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. Lynn, thank you so much, Dr. Mellman.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you go. Laughter is definitely the best medicine. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Leah calling from Gaithersburg. What do you think? What's on your mind?
Hi, I think I have to agree with the last caller. Mm-hmm. I've been looking at a lot of the organizing going on, but what relieves my stress, because I quit watching a lot of it for a while because it was so irritating. But now I think it's time to take action. So I've been participating in the protests. I'm having meetings on the Hill talking about jobs agenda. I'm inserting myself into places where I feel like I can actually make a change and a difference and help to push the people's agenda forward and not President Trump's agenda.
Interesting, Leah. Thank you so much. Dr. Mellman, talk to me a little bit about how some of these things present with people. How do you know that you're feeling this anxiety and stress? What happens with our bodies?
Well, you mentioned the fight or flight response, and indeed we have well-programmed mechanisms that have protected humanity for many generations that allow us to be keyed up, to be highly vigilant, to be able to flee or freeze or fight, I suppose is. But I don't want to confuse that kind of fighting with the positive taking action that Leah and Lynn both mentioned, because I think, passivity can make things even more stressful, and the type of activism they're advocating I would totally support. But if these reactions of the sympathetic nervous system endure, they affect the body in adverse ways. They raise blood pressure. They accelerate aging. You mentioned the name of my program, the Sleep Stress Studies Program, and I think sleep is a very informative barometer of a person's stress level. So if you're sleeping at night and you're sleeping and your sleep is restful, then that physiological relaxation will occur. But if you're not sleeping, or if your sleep is restless, then you may not get that physiological respite, and it can take its toll. So if people are losing sleep, I think that's a sign that they should try to find some alternative ways of coping. And again, I mentioned exercise is very important. One can do meditative activities, but one can engage in the things that they feel good about while maintaining appropriate concern. And so I guess maybe my final, perhaps most important take-home message is, do not look at social media while lying in bed.
How about that? Okay.
Process that before going to sleep and relaxing, and then put it away.
Sounds good. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about anxiety and stress that may be caused by what you're seeing coming from President Trump's executive orders, and, what's happening at the White House could be indeed impacting what's happening at your house. Let's talk to Vivian. Vivian, calling from West Virginia. Vivian, thanks for calling. What's happening? What's on your mind?
Thank you. Yes, it does feel stressful, even though I don't like to use that word. I don't like to use the word fear. I don't like to use the word, afraid or scared. So the way that I've been handling it is just by more prayer, more trying to relax and walk and exercise. And to be honest, just turning it off and not looking at it, and just laying it at the feet of the Lord, because, God is in charge, and, prayer is about the only thing to fix it. I grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s and saw a lot of crazy stuff happen out there where I live. And it just kind of reminds me of that time, because there doesn't seem to be any healing. The healing process hasn't started for the nation. It's a mess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Vivian, thank you.
People are stressed.
Yeah.
I can't look at the news and I worked in the government, so I know, hey, you're doing this or you're saying that. And I've even been reading the Constitution. I'm like, is what he's doing makes sense and it's legal? And it's like nobody is stopping him, correcting him, slapping his hand. He just feels too comfortable doing it.
Yeah, well,
but I do pray for him. I pray for him that he would stop and think.
Okay. Well, Vivian, thank you so much. I appreciate your input. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. If you're feeling anxiety and stress because of some of the actions of President Trump, how are you dealing with it? How is it impacting your life? Go right ahead, Dr. Cutts, please.
Well, I actually wanted to make a comment based on what Vivian said about prayer. And, I have been focusing my sort of response to this Trump presidency on the serenity prayer. And I'm just saying, Goddess, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because I think that covers all the bases. There's certain things I might not be able to change, and our other callers alluded to this also, that they're making themselves useful where they can. I think it's important when we experience stress and when we have the stress hormones that are released in our body that Dr. Mellman talked about that are adaptive. We either need to do something to calm ourselves, to get our, parasympathetic nervous systems working, and we need to use that energy. So, I say don't just get riled up looking at Facebook or something, but to do something about it also relieves stress, because when we feel powerless, it leads to us feeling hopeless a lot of times, or feeling victim or being victimized. So, if it feels right for you, I strongly suggest, actually taking some action so that you are engaged.
Sounds good. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Charles calling from Dumfries. What's on your mind, Charles?
Hey, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Doing just fine.
Hey, man, I listen to you guys all the time, man. I think this is the coolest radio show in the world.
Thank you so much, Charles. I appreciate that. I really do. So what's on your mind? How are you handling this?
Well, I'm actually listening to all your callers. I'm actually sitting here right now. I'm just getting here from work, right? And I'm listening to this, and actually I'm pretty much stressed out about a lot of things, but including the executive orders and some other stuff. But, the thing about it is, and the other doctor just said a moment ago, the female, that the serenity prayer, this is what we've got to deal with for the next 4 years. I mean, we just got to deal with it. And so how we handle that is up to us individually and responsibly. So I don't know what to say. There's a lot of things that are wrong. But in my opinion, it's up to us as a population and as a country to vote on midterm elections, because I really feel like the corruption is in the Senate, the House, and the representatives. So we need to pay a little more attention to every 2 years after everything. Everybody thinks the president can change everything. He can't. Mm-hmm. It's the Congress and the Senate. So,
but Charles, thank you so much, and I really appreciate it, because you brought up something that we haven't discussed. The reality is that the election has been held. Donald Trump has been sworn in. We have, 4 years 4 years at least, where he is president, barring any extreme changes that can always happen, as we've seen, as it relates to, our various and sundry presidents over the many, many, many years. But the reality is he's going to be here for at least 4 years. And if he doesn't change, then perhaps we need to change. Dr. Mellman?
Absolutely. I mean, Charles is describing an important type of activism that has consequences. And as Dr. Cutts was referring to before, where it's much better for our mental health and perhaps the world we're affecting and the society we're living in to figure out what one can do and not just feel victimized by what's already happened and can't be changed in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Should you try to just ignore it if it just gets to the point where you're just, here's, another day, another unusual move by the president? And I mean, can some folks just kind of throw up their hands and say, I'm just going to put my head down, go to work, and go about my business?
I prefer taking a break to ignoring.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Mellman. It's like what he was mentioning earlier, avoiding, denying, suppressing, that can work in the short term. And if you need to compartmentalize and put something aside, but as a long-term strategy, it doesn't promote a healthy emotional or physical state.
Mm-hmm. How should someone go about, and I want to drill down a little bit more, we talk about meditation and what have you, because I think the reality is that, no one should completely ignore, take a break, but you still want to know what's going on. One could argue that this is about a lifelong civics lesson, whether it's, Ronald Reagan, whether it's George Bush, Barack Obama, or Donald Trump. You need to know what's happening in your country. And so how do you meditate? How do you really find time to relax? Short of just grabbing your passport and going to a beach.
if you can, if you can grab your passport. Yeah. I think that you can do one thing at a time. I think there's a time for increasing your knowledge and being informed, and there's a time for stress relief and meditation and relaxation. And I think that being mindful of staying in each one of those places when you're there is helpful. I've been walking a lot. I do my yoga. Sometimes, it's just a matter of breathing. If you're at work, like our caller earlier, and something's coming up, whether it's this or something else, to stop and take a breath, to refocus. Stress also comes from your thoughts about a situation. So paying attention to what you're thinking about, paying attention to what you're putting your attention on. There are a lot of good things that are going on right now. The activism that's going on, the learning that's going on, the solidarity that's going on. So maybe to shift your attention to some of those things is also helpful.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about children, because children feel it too. And I'll tell you why I say that in just a bit. Lines are still open at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Stress and anxiety because of some of the actions that are coming out of the White House. How do you deal with it? How is it impacting your house? We'll be back in just a moment. Channel 141, I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our discussion about anxiety, about stress, sleeplessness as a result of some of the actions that are coming out of the White House. How is it impacting you, and how are you dealing with it? Lines are still open at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Sandra calling from Capitol Heights. Hey, Sandra, what's on your mind?
How are you? Thank you for having me.
Sure,
I just
go right
wanted
ahead.
to say what's causing me to not really ignore it or be in denial. I look at my grandparents as inspiration. They were both born in Washington, D.C. in 1900. So you can imagine they went through many generations of presidents that were just like Mr. Trump, and they survived. They grew up in Georgetown, where it was a sizable African-American community. They were able to purchase an additional home in Columbia Heights as an investment property. So when I look at what they had to go through in Washington, D.C., that was a segregated town, and the amount of presidents that they put up with that had raw racism. And when I look at where they were financially when they were young adults growing up in D.C. in the 1920s, and they were able to be more financially fit than I was when I was a young adult, that's what gives me inspiration and a stress-free mindset.
How about that? That's a really positive, way to look at it. Sometimes, looking back, has its advantages just as so many people are looking forward.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Sandra, thank you so much. I appreciate your input. I was mentioning children. And this is why, just looking at it from where we are here, the D.C. metropolitan area, one of the most diverse cities in America, where, our children are going to school with other children who are from south of the border, children who are from the Middle East, children whose parents may be adversely impacted by whether it's executive orders or some of the statements that the president has made. And so, Dr. Mellman, I can only imagine if I'm an elementary school student and my best friend is from Mexico, what as a father do I tell my child who has a friend whose family is from Mexico, or whose family is, from the Middle East, or maybe even one of these countries that are mentioned in the travel ban? I can imagine it would be horrifying for a child.
Well, you're certainly right to underscore the effect of all this on children. Children pay attention. They're aware of things. They perceive what's going on. And I think the most important thing is to listen for cues, provide them with the right kind of guidance, and support those friendships that you mentioned.
What kind of cues that might you see or hear or sense from your child if they're feeling anxiety as a result of this?
Well, facial expressions, withdrawing, not spending time with that friend that they had previously been spending time with. withdrawing from activities, schoolwork, and sleep, as I mentioned before, in adults and children. Those are all things to be attentive to. But I think parents can make good judgments about these things, and when encouraged, children will express themselves.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Cutts?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Mellman. I think that you want to, even before all this was happening, but especially now, help your children to increase their emotional intelligence. Talk about feelings with them, in a safe way, and give them an opportunity to talk about their feelings. But as Dr. Mellman was saying, children are not always going to be adept at saying, I feel this or I feel that. So you do have to look for those kind of signs. But I also think that normalizing having the feelings is important, showing that you have feelings, asking them about their feelings, and also helping to build their resilience, because this is not the last time in their lives that they're going to face stressful situations. So, normalize, validate how they're feeling, but also encourage them, let them know that they are strong, that they are able to get through trying times. I think that can be helpful.
But you said something that just struck me. If you show your child your feelings of anxiety, does that necessarily make them feel safe?
It doesn't necessarily make them feel safe. It depends on how you show them that you're feeling stressed or anxious. I think what's important is that you show them that you do have feelings and this is how you deal with them. But if they just see you stressed out and anxious, I think that's going to cause worry for them. But I also don't think that you should just pretend as if nothing is going on. Children are going to see that. But of course, parents make their own judgments, and, rightfully so, to say, well, how much do I think this child can see? But I think it's important, and it probably encourages parents to deal with their anxiety and stress, because they know that their children are modeling, or they're modeling for their children.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I want to underscore what I think is a very important point that Dr. Cutts made, and that is that adults have a capacity to verbalize what they're feeling that children may not have. And I think by doing that, so actually I think, saying to your son or daughter, I'm worried, I'm concerned, but this is what I think, and, keeping the perspective of our previous caller, that perspective is so important. Mm-hmm. Other people have gone through this, sometimes worse, supporting their resilience. But I do think verbalizing, providing words to describe the state that they may be sharing is helpful, and something parents can do for their children, even when it acknowledges some difficulty.
Talk to me about the difference between someone who may be angry or upset about the outcome of the election and someone who is feeling stress about what is happening now. How do you know the difference? I don't mean as a clinician, but I mean as an individual. How do I know that if I was angry on November 9th, that I'm not just still angry now?
Well, I think that a lot of folks were angry on November 9th because they had a feeling of, they saw what Trump and his administration represented. So I think a lot of folks actually, after the inauguration, said, let's wait and give him a chance. Maybe it's not going to be as bad as many of us imagined it would be. I think that it's been worse than a lot of us imagined. I'm just going to keep it real. So, if you were angry then, that might have been projection. But if you're angry now, why? What is it that's bothering me? And again, I say get active. Dr. Mellman says, he believes in activism also. What are you angry about? Okay, then what are you going to do about it? Don't just sit around and be angry.
Can this anxiety make you sick?
Absolutely. And, thinking back to your question, what's behind it? I mean, life is inherently stressful, and that's not to be avoided. But, you want that balance. If a person didn't get upset or, they wouldn't be fully alive. So, emotions ideally lead to actions, and those actions can then help process the emotions. But, if a person's not sleeping well, not sleeping restfully, continuously preoccupied to the extent that they can't be mindful of other things, that's a sign of a problem. And I think we've talked about, as well as our callers have talked about, constructive ways of coping with that. If that's not working, then get professional help.
And which leads me to my final question. You may be physiologically ill, but also can this lead to depression, or is that an overreach?
No, I don't think it's an overreach. I think that circumstances can trigger your moods, or the way you think about a circumstance can trigger your mood. If you already have underlying depression or anxiety, this could definitely compound that. Now, in terms of seeing someone or getting treatment, as Dr. Mellman was saying, if your anxiety or your stress is starting to interfere with your daily living, and it's more than what your current coping mechanisms can handle, then definitely I think you should reach outside of yourself, possibly to a professional, to your support group, to other people.
Mm-hmm. Something certainly, that we should all, talk about, no matter what you may feel about, the president personally, but every president does something that we may find upsetting or, certainly, distressing. And maybe it would be time to kind of, gird yourself up.
I agree. And I also think that it's important that we underscore self-care, that during this time, whether you are getting active or not, but, people are already now we're going into the third week, people are already starting to talk about burnout. And I've heard this before, and I need to take this to heart. And I think that your listeners need to hear that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So you do have to pace yourself, and you also need to take care of yourself. We need to, not let the stress with Trump make you drink more, eat more, smoke more, but to do those things less. Exercise, eat right, get proper sleep, and take good care of yourselves.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place for us to end here. I want to thank both of you for sharing with us as we, move, like you said, into, the third week. We have, 4 years to go. So if it's bothering you now, it's time for you to prepare to address it as best you can, because you still got to go to work in the morning. So there it is. So that's it. Dr. Nicole Cutts and Dr. Thomas Mellman, thank you both so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
That is the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141 for this Monday, February 6th. I'm Harold Fisher. You can follow me on Twitter at Daily Drum, WHUR, or H. Fisher, WHUR. Now, stay tuned for The Connection with Lorna Newton. Good night.
The Howard University Radio Network is WHUR 96.3 FM, WHUR World 96.3 HD2, student-run WHBC HD3, GlassHouseRadio.com, SiriusXM Channel 142, HBCU, and SiriusXM Channel 141, HUR Voices, Washington.
Sexually, I've been there.